Howdy! Welcome to the workshop on installing Amazon Lumberyard version 1.7. In the first video, we covered a brief introduction to Lumberyard and concluded with a few recommendations on preparing for installation. I want to quickly go through the list of recommendations before we get started. If you do not have an account with Audio Connect, you'll want to create an account and be logged in. You'll want to download the Wise launcher and install it. We did not install Wise, we just installed the launcher. If you don't have Visual Studio installed, you'll want to download and install Visual Studio. And if you're using Visual Studio 2013, you will need the update 4. If you're using Visual Studio 2015, you will need to download and install update 3. And if you do not use C++ or you're just installing Visual Studio, you'll want to make sure you set C++ as your language. It is not set by default, so you'll need to take care of that before beginning the installation. In addition, since we're actually not finished downloading and installing all the software we'll need, it will be useful to have your Lumberyard directory and your download directory handy. So I have mine open and ready for use. Head on over to your download directory or wherever you have the Lumberyard installer, and go ahead and launch that, but do not install. Do not start the installation just yet, because I have one more word of warning. For those of you who are not installing to the default location, click on Options. The file path listed here is the default location. And this is good to know, especially for everyone who is installing to the default location. You'll be able to find your files at this location after you're finished installing Lumberyard. And you'll need to know where to find them too, so take note of that. However, for those of us who are not installing to the default location, such as myself, I'm installing to my F drive, we need to set the installation location. So for everyone installing somewhere else, browse to the location you're installing Lumberyard, and for me that would be my F drive, Programs, and Lumberyard. One word of warning, it's a known issue that the file path for your installation should not exceed 54 characters, so be aware of that. Shouldn't be a problem for me. Now if you forget to set the installation location, you may still be able to install the Lumberyard editor. I can install Lumberyard on my C drive. It's only about 10 gigabytes and I have more than enough room for that. However, I don't have room for everything else. And if I try to install to my C drive, at some point I'm going to run into a problem. I would most likely have to uninstall and reinstall everything. And that would be a real pain in the neck, and I would hate to see anyone make that mistake. That's a mistake you would probably only make once, but let's try and avoid learning that lesson the hard way. So after you set the install location, for those of you who are installing somewhere else, click OK, and we should all be set to begin the installation of Lumberyard version 1.7. Let's do it. Lumberyard successfully installed, and you may have noticed the creation of a few shortcuts on your desktop as it completed the installation. One of these is the Setup Assistant. This is what runs when you click on the Launch button. If you need to stop or close the installer window, you can do so. You can continue the installation later, or even update your install configuration at a later date by running the Setup Assistant. I'm going to close the Lumberyard setup window because there's one thing I want to do before I run the Setup Assistant. In the Lumberyard directory, there's the editor version directory, and there's a third-party directory. And this is where we're going to be installing various third-party software. And one of those will be the FBX Software Development Kit. So I'm going to create an FBX SDK directory in preparation for that. You don't have to do this now. You can do it later as part of the installation with the Setup Assistant. But I think that'll make it a little bit easier. Then I'm going to run the Setup Assistant. So here we are on the first page of the Setup Assistant. And there are a number of options. The first thing I want to make sure I do is check off the first 4 options here at the top. And then choose which version of Visual Studio I will be using. You can choose 2013, you can choose 2015, or you can choose both if you like. Once you're finished making those selections, you can continue to the next page. You can either use this menu on the left or use the next button at the bottom right. Going to the next page, we have required software. I want to make sure that everything is checked off as good to go here. A little green check for the status on the far right. You'll see that Audio Connect Wise is not, and the encoder, the video encoding software, we don't even have that software yet. We haven't downloaded it yet. So you can do that by clicking on the Install It button here and the Get It button here. So we're going to do that next. And I'm going to start with Wise. I'm going to install that. And this makes it very easy to do because it takes you directly to what you need to install. So I'm going to make my selections here real quick and choose Install for Wise. Success. And it's now listed as installed. The Amazon Lumberyard team is working hard to make the setup and installation as easy for you as possible. So here for the encoder, let's get it. And that'll take us exactly to the page we need to be on to download that software. Let's go ahead and save that. And you can close this. Now that is going to be in your download folder or your download directory, wherever that is, and it's going to be compressed. So I'm going to extract that file. And then I'm going to go back to the third-party directory, and I'm going to cut and paste that right in there. So now I have the encoder here, and this directory here is going to be of importance to us right here. It's good to know where that is because if you go back to the Lumberyard installer, you'll see this browse here for this. Let's browse to that directory. So that's on my F drive. Programs, Lumberyard, third party. There it is right there. Select this binary directory, the bin folder. Just select that folder. And you should see it checked off as good to go. So we're done with the install software. Everything should be green at this point. And we'll go to the required SDKs. You'll notice the FBX SDK is on this page. And you'll see that there are directions here for how to deal with the Autodesk FBX. You don't have to install the Autodesk FBX SDK immediately. You can install it later if you like. Just return to the Setup Assistant, follow these directions, and you should be able to get the Autodesk FBX Software Development Kit installed without any problems. Just be aware of one thing. When you click on this link, go to Autodesk FBX, it's going to bring you to this page with all these different installers. And you'll want to pick out the one that meets your needs. I know that these instructions state to download the 2016.1.2 version. for Visual Studio's 2013, but if you're using Visual Studio 2015, this may be a problem. So choose the one that meets the needs for your configuration. Download that and install it. Go ahead and do that now if you like. Once the FBX software development kit has finished downloading, go to the download directory, find it, and run it. Or run it directly from your browser if you like. Now on this one, be careful about where you're installing it. I'm gonna browse to that directory I created. That FBX directory I created. So that is on my F drive. Programs, Lumberyard, third party, and there's my FBX SDK directory. That's where I want to install it at. And it's completed. Now this FBX SDK, like the video encoder, that's probably the tricky part of the installation. If you can get past that, you're doing pretty good. And now for the easy part. Just click on the Install All button at the very top and it'll take care of installing all the rest of the third-party software for you. This may take a few minutes. Patience you must have. So I'll see you on the other side. Good luck. Alright, the required SDKs have finished installing. Let's verify that everything has been installed properly. We want to check the status on the far right here. And I see the Autodesk FBX SDK is still listed as invalid. Looks like everything else is good. Outstanding. There is a refresh button up here at the top right, and under version 1.6 it was pretty slow. I think it rechecked everything. I believe they've speeded this up considerably with version 1.7. Perhaps they're only checking the changes now. So I'm going to give this a try and see if that'll check off the Autodesk FBX SDK as valid. But if that doesn't work, I'll need to investigate why that is listed as invalid. So let's give that a shot first. It took a little bit of work, but by downloading and installing that FBX SDK for Visual Studio 2015, I got it working. So there it is, it's checked off, it's good to go. So let's go to the optional SDKs. These are all optional. I'm not planning to make use of these at this time, so I'm not going to worry about it, although I am surprised to see this one as invalid because it's, as far as I know, it's still valid over here. But if it's optional, I'm not going to worry about it. Now, you may not be using plugins, but you'll still want to go to this page and check the RC shell commands. This needs to be checked off as good. And whether or not you install any of the plugins is up to you. If you choose to do so later, you can just relaunch the Setup Assistant and install whatever you need. So let's just go over to the summary page. And everything's looking pretty good here. So from here we can launch the editor, or we can launch Configure Project. Let's launch Configure Project, and if you select Configure Project, it's going to run the project configurator. So let's take a look at that real quick. Lumberyard has a number of sample projects already installed. And this sample project here on the far right with the white check mark, that indicates this is the default project. And when you run the Lumberyard editor, the default project is the one that is loaded. It's very easy to change the default project. Just select the project you would prefer to have as your default project and click on the Set as Default button at the top right. It's as easy as that to set your default project. I'm going to leave mine set to the Samples project. If you want to create a new project, all you have to do is click on this Create New button. I don't plan to create a new project at this time. I'll do that in the next video. But what you may notice is missing is there's no easy way to delete a project. If you want to delete a project, you have to do that manually. However, I will warn you, if you delete the default project, the project configurator won't launch. It won't do anything, and it won't give you any indication as to what the problem is. So before you delete a project, make sure it is not set to default. If it is set to default, change it before you delete it. To delete a project, you can go to the Lumberyard directory, the dev directory, and scroll down until you find the folder with your project in it. And this is set to the samples project. So if I were to delete the samples project, and there's some additional files in the code directory, and if I find the samples project there and delete that as well, I have deleted the samples project. And I've closed the project configurator. So if I try to run the project configurator, and nothing. It won't work, and I won't know why, and I will be very unhappy. So, trying to avoid that mistake, I'm going to restore my project, get it out of the trash, put it back where it belongs. And now, the project configurator, it runs. And I'm very happy. So try not to learn that lesson the hard way. You won't be very happy when that happens, because if you should delete your trash, restoring from that point is going to be much more difficult. So that covers everything. The last thing to do is to verify the Lumberyard editor runs. So let's close the configurator. And let's launch Lumberyard. So Lumberyard's running. Outstanding. We got it working. Let's check out a level. Open a level. We've got, here's a getting started completed level. Let's open that one. So there it is. We've installed Lumberyard, we've configured it, we've run the editor, we've launched a level, and everything seems to be working. Now this isn't a complete test by any stretch of the imagination, so I want to create a new project and make sure everything's working properly. But as I mentioned before, we'll save that for the next video. So you're welcome to come back to the workshop for that. And until then, good luck with your projects.